The Louisiana swamp breathes. Elias Eli Kane had forgotten that. It wasn't the gentle rise and fall of a sleeping chest, but the wet, sticky exhalation of a diseased lung. The air, thick enough to drink, tasted of rot and time, clinging to the back of his throat like a fever. He hadn't tasted it in 20 years, not since he'd buried his childhood here and fled north, trading the suffocating embrace of the bayou for the cold, hard lines of concrete and steel. He'd sworn he would die before he came back. But death, he was discovering, had many forms. Sometimes it came in a hail of bullets in a Chicago tenement, a clean, professional affair. And sometimes it came in a cardboard box, smelling of the very mud he'd run from. The box had been waiting on the steps of his sterile Nashville office. Inside, nestled on a bed of Spanish moss, was a mud-caked compass. Not just any compass. The one he'd given his daughter, Clara, on her 16th birthday. The silver backing engraved with the words times ad astra per aspera times a foolish, hopeful sentiment from a father who was already a ghost in his daughter's life. Beneath it lay a piece of brittle parchment, the ink a rusty brown, the script an elegant spidery scroll from another century. Asterisk. The bloodline is weak. The swamp demands its due. Asterisk. One phone call confirmed it. Clara, his brilliant, stubborn Clara, who saw history not as a collection of facts, but as a tapestry of ghosts, had disappeared 2 weeks ago. Her doctoral thesis, Cycles of Violence and Folklore in the Antebellum South, a case study of the Devereaux family. She had gone to Belle Rêve plantation, the black beating heart of the parish. The very place Eli had warned her was a tomb. The place where his best friend, Michael, had been swallowed whole by the swamp 2 decades ago. The local sheriff, a bloated man named Thibodeau whose voice oozed a syrupy false courtesy over the phone, had already closed the case. "She's a grown woman, Mr. Kane," he drawled. "Probably found herself a fella. Ran off to New Orleans. This land has a way of making people forget their obligations." Eli knew better. The land didn't make you forget. It made you remember everything, and then it took you for it. He hung up, the rage a cold, familiar weight in his gut. He was a former U.S. Marshal, now a private investigator who found people the world had given up on. But this wasn't a job. This was a reckoning. He packed with grim efficiency. His battered Remington 870, its stock worn smooth by his hands. A waterproof satchel with tracking gear, a medical kit, and, from old habit, a heavy canvas bag of rock salt. Tucked into a hidden compartment were 3 small, precise explosive charges, relics from a life he'd tried to leave behind. He was going back to the one place on Earth he had ever truly feared. He was going to Belle Rêve. The parish line was an invisible threshold. The air grew heavier. The sunlight seemed to curdle, filtered through the thick canopy of cypress and oak. The drone of cicadas wasn't a sound. It was the frequency of the heat itself, a constant oppressive thrum that vibrated in a man's bones. To get to Belle Rêve, you didn't use roads. You used the water, the dark, slick arteries of the bayou. And for that, Eli needed a guide. The name he was given in a hushed tone at a ramshackle fishing dock was Beau. A Cajun, they said, who knew the swamp better than the gators did. Eli found him mending a net by a pirogue, his back to the setting Sunday. Beau was a man carved from cypress wood, lean, hard, and weathered. His face was a mask of stoic neutrality, but his eyes, dark and watchful, missed nothing. "Belle Rêve," Eli said, without preamble. Beau didn't look up from his net. "Ain't no reason for a man to go there. My daughter's there." Beau's hands stilled. He finally looked at Eli, a flicker of something pity, perhaps in his gaze. "The Devereaux family. They ain't good people. They got a debt with this land, an old one." "I'm not interested in their credit history," Eli said, his voice flat. "I'm getting my daughter." Bo studied him for a long moment, his eyes tracing the hard lines of Eli's face, the coiled tension in his shoulders. "That swamp, it tests you. It finds what you're made of," he grunted, a sound of grim acceptance. "The Devereaux took something from my family a long time ago. I got my own debts to settle." "I'll take you." The journey began at dawn, the pirogue gliding through water as black and reflective as polished obsidian. Cypress knees jutted from the murk like the gnarled fingers of drowned men. Veils of Spanish moss hung from the branches, swaying like funeral shrouds in the humid air. The world dissolved into a labyrinth of green and brown, the only sounds the dip of Bo's paddle and the ceaseless, maddening hum of insects. Bo navigated the maze of waterways with an instinct that bordered on supernatural. He was a man of few words, pointing out water moccasins coiled on low-hanging branches or the submerged logs that could tear a boat open. He handled his own shotgun with a casual, deadly grace. For the first time in a long time, Eli felt a sliver of professional respect. The man was capable. Late in the afternoon, Bo steered them toward a small, overgrown island. "We rest here. Travel at night's a fool's errand." As Eli secured the boat, his foot caught on something half buried in the mud. He dug it out. It was a hiking boot, caked in black sludge. The rot, however, wasn't normal. The leather was brittle, crumbling to dust at his touch, the rubber sole weirdly spongy, as if it had been chemically dissolved. "The swamp's touch," Bo said, his voice low. He wouldn't meet Eli's eyes. "Things don't last long out here. This isn't natural decay," Eli countered, rubbing the foul-smelling residue from his fingers. "Nothing about this place is natural," Bo replied, and the conversation was over. That night, as Eli kept watch, the swamp came alive with a different chorus of sounds. The guttural bellow of a bull gator, the splash of unseen things, and something else. A whisper carried on the breeze that seemed to slither through the trees just at the edge of hearing. He felt a primal dread tighten its cold fist around his spine. It was the same feeling he'd had the night Michael disappeared, a sense of being watched by something ancient and utterly without mercy. He checked the action on his Remington, the familiar times, shuck times, a small, hollow comfort in the vast, hungry darkness. They saw Belle Rêve before they reached it, a ghost shimmering in the humid haze. Two massive soot-stained columns rose from the swamp like broken teeth, all that remained of a grand entrance. The mansion itself was a monument to decay. It sagged into the marsh, its white paint blistered and peeling, its porch collapsing under the weight of kudzu vines. The windows were dark, vacant eyes staring out at the wilderness that was slowly, methodically swallowing it whole. The air hung thick with the cloying, sickly sweet scent of night-blooming jasmine and the metallic tang of stagnant water. "We go in quiet," Bo whispered, beaching the pirogue in the shadow of a massive, weeping oak. "Devereaux keeps men. Not many, but they're mean." They moved like specters through the overgrown gardens, past crumbling statues of forgotten angels. Eli's senses were on fire, every snapped twig, every rustle of leaves screaming a warning. They entered through a collapsed conservatory, the floor a treacherous carpet of shattered glass and dead leaves. The inside of the mansion was a mausoleum of lost grandeur. Rotting silk wallpaper peeled from the walls, revealing black mold beneath. A grand staircase, its banister warped and splintered, swept up into the oppressive gloom. In the cavernous ballroom, Eli's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a portrait gallery. The Devereaux lineage. Generation after generation of pale, aristocratic faces with cold, cruel eyes. As he moved the beam down the line, he saw a disturbing progression. The faces grew thinner, the skin more sallow, the eyes holding a desperate, haunted look. The last portrait was of a young man, impossibly handsome, but with a shadow in his eyes that was centuries old. "Auguste Devereaux," Beau murmured from behind him. "The last of them." A floorboard creaked above them. They froze, melting back into the shadows. Two men, armed with hunting rifles, descended the staircase, their conversation a low rumble. "Don't like it. The girl ain't eatin'. And him, he's been talking to the walls again. Just shut up and do what he pays you for. The ritual's tonight. After that, it won't matter." Eli and Beau exchanged a look. Asterisk. Tonight. Asterisk. They followed the guards through the decaying halls, their path leading them out the back of the mansion, toward the ruins of the old slave quarters. Only the brick foundations and a few skeletal chimneys remained, stark against the darkening sky. Beau pointed to a large, flat stone nestled between two crumbling foundations. "There. Old root cellar. Place is bad medicine. They used to say..." He trailed off. "Say what?" Eli pressed. "That's where the Devereaux paid their debts." As Eli knelt to examine the stone, a sudden, blinding pain exploded at the back of his skull. The world tilted, the drone of the cicadas swelling into a deafening roar before collapsing into black silence. His first sensation on waking was the foul, coppery taste of swamp water in his mouth. He was lying on damp stone, his head throbbing in rhythm with his heartbeat. He pushed himself up, his muscles screaming in protest. He was in a cellar, a large, circular chamber with a domed brick ceiling. Knee-deep, filthy water covered the floor. In the center of the room was a crude stone altar, and chained to it was Clara. She was pale and unconscious, her face smudged with dirt, but she was alive, relief warred with a fresh surge of fury. Across the room, standing beside a flickering lantern, was Auguste Devereaux. He was just as handsome as his portrait, dressed in an immaculate white linen suit that seemed to repel the filth around him. He held a glass of amber liquid, a faint, condescending smile playing on his lips. "Ah, the father arrives," Auguste said, his voice a silken baritone. "A bit theatrical, I'll admit, but we do so love our traditions here in the South." "Let her go, Devereaux." Eli's voice was a low growl. He started to move, but a figure stepped out of the shadows, leveling a shotgun at his chest. Beau. The Cajun's face was unreadable, the stoic mask back in place. There was no hatred in his eyes, no satisfaction. There was nothing. "Why?" Eli asked, the single word heavy with betrayal. "My family is bound by an oath," Beau said, his voice flat. "Generations of service. The swamp demands its due, Mr. Kane. And the ritual requires two souls. One to be the vessel." He nodded toward Clara. "And one to be the fuel. He had to know if you were strong enough to burn." "A pact," Devereaux said, taking a delicate sip from his glass. "My ancestor was a clever man. He bound a spirit of this place, a raw, hungry thing to our bloodline in exchange for prosperity. But the spirit feeds. It has fed on my family for 200 years. And I am the last dreg at the bottom of the bottle." He gestured with a slightly trembling hand, and for the first time, Eli saw the faint, translucent quality of his skin, the web of dark veins beneath. "I am being consumed. Your daughter, with her vibrant life, her historical curiosity, will make a fine new host. And your own formidable spirit, Mr. Kane. Your rage and your grief, that will be the spark that ignites the transfer. It will give the entity the strength to possess her, and it will grant me, finally, immortality." As he spoke, the murky water in the center of the chamber began to bubble, not with heat, but with a cold, malevolent energy. The muck began to churn and rise, coalescing into a form that defied nature. It was tall, impossibly thin, a man-shaped thing woven from mud, rotting cypress roots, and dripping strands of moss. Its limbs were too long, its movements silent and fluid. A featureless mask of hardened muck served as its face, save for 2 points of light that ignited within, glowing with the baleful green of marsh gas. The lank man of the mire had come for its tribute. The fight was a primal explosion of violence in the claustrophobic chamber. Eli launched himself not at Devereaux, but at Beau, the immediate threat. He slammed into the Cajun, sending both of them crashing into the foul water. The shotgun discharged, the blast deafening in the enclosed space, blowing a chunk of brick from the ceiling. Eli's martial training took over, a cold, brutal calculus of survival. He drove his elbow into Beau's throat, wresting the shotgun free. Beau was strong, a seasoned hunter, and he fought back with silent, desperate ferocity. It was a clumsy, churning brawl in the sucking mud and water. Across the cellar, Devereaux chanted in a language that was all harsh consonants and sibilant whispers. The lank man solidified, taking a step forward. Where its foot fell, the water sizzled, and a stone flagstone cracked and turned gray, withering as if aged 1,000 years in a second. Eli shoved Beau away and scrambled to his feet, bringing the shotgun to bear on the monster. He fired. The buckshot ripped through the creature's torso, leaving a gaping hole. But there was no blood, no screech of pain. The mud and vines simply swirled and flowed back together, closing the wound as if it had never been. "You cannot kill the swamp, you fool!" Devereaux shrieked, his voice cracking with ecstatic madness. Roots, thick as pythons, erupted from the floor, snaking around Eli's ankles, pulling him down. The lank man glided toward him, its long, twig-like fingers reaching. Eli could feel the life-draining cold emanating from it. He fired again. Then again, emptying the shotgun to no effect. Desperation clawed at him. He was outmatched. He couldn't fight it. He couldn't kill a thing that was made of the very ground he stood on. His eyes darted around the cellar, searching for anything, any weapon, any escape. His gaze fell on his waterproof satchel, which Beau had tossed into a corner. The salt, the charges. A memory surfaced, a whisper from his long-dead grandmother, a woman who knew the old ways, the hoodoo that was the secret soul of this land. Asterisk, haints can't cross runnin' water. Petit. And salt. Salt makes the ground pure. Asterisk. He saw it then. On the far wall, a section of brick was darker than the rest, weeping with a thin, steady trickle of water that was cleaner than the filth on the floor. A spring. A subterranean freshwater spring trapped behind the cellar wall. He fought against the grasping roots, kicking free and lunging for his satchel. Beau was on him again, a hunting knife flashing in the lantern light. Eli blocked the strike with his forearm, the steel slicing deep. He grunted in pain, headbutting the Cajun hard, stunning him for a precious second. He ripped the satchel open, his hands fumbling with the small explosive charge and the heavy bag of salt. The lank man was almost upon him, its marsh gas eyes burning into him. Devereaux's chanting reached a fever pitch. "Now!" the aristocrat screamed. "Feed it! Feed the mire!" Eli slapped the charge onto the weeping wall, priming the detonator. With his other hand, he tore open the bag of salt, throwing its entire contents into the water at the base of the wall. He threw himself backward, covering Clara's body with his own, just as he hit the trigger. The explosion wasn't large, but it was deafening. The wall blew inward, and a torrent of pure, clean water burst into the cellar. The effect was instantaneous and horrific. As the salted, running water washed over the lank man, the creature convulsed. It threw its head back in a silent, agonizing scream, its form dissolving, melting away like sugar in the rain. The mud, vines, and rage that held it together were neutralized, cleansed by the pure water. It collapsed into a churning slurry and was gone. A piercing shriek echoed from Devereaux. The psychic backlash was absolute. As the entity his family had been bound to was destroyed, the centuries of stolen life caught up to him. His skin cracked and withered, his hair turned to dust, his fine suit crumbled from his desiccating bones. In a matter of seconds, Auguste Devereaux, the last scion of Belle Rêve, was a pile of ancient dust on the rising water. Eli staggered to his feet, bleeding and exhausted. The only one left was Beau. The Cajun stared at the pile of dust, his face a canvas of shock and horror. The oath that had bound his family for generations was broken. He was free. He looked at Eli, and in his eyes was a terrifying emptiness. "It's over!" Eli gasped. Beau raised his knife. "My life had a purpose," he whispered. "You took that." The final confrontation wasn't long. It was ugly, personal, and fueled by the last dregs of Eli's adrenaline. When it was done, Beau lay still in the cleansing water, his debt finally, truly paid. The cellar was groaning, the ceiling beginning to collapse. Eli cut Clara's bonds and lifted her into his arms. She was stirring, her eyelids fluttering. He carried her up the crumbling stairs and out of the ruins, scrambling away as the ground behind them gave way, swallowing the cursed cellar forever. They emerged into the humid Louisiana dawn. The sun was rising, painting the sky in hues of soft pink and orange. The air, for the first time, felt light. The drone of the insects was just a sound now, not a threat. The oppressive weight of Belle Rêve, the ancient hunger of the swamp, was gone. Eli looked down at his daughter, her head resting on his shoulder. He had walked back into the hell he'd run from, faced the ghost that had haunted him for 20 years, and had saved his future. He started the long walk back toward the water, back toward the world of the living. The weight in his arms, the only thing that mattered. The swamp was quiet. The debt was paid.